Ontario to stop COVID-19 wastewater surveillance. Students at York University join pro-Palestine encampment movement. Israel has been carrying out foreign influence campaigns in America and Canada. And paramilitary militia carries out massacre in Al Jazeera state in Sudan. Good morning. It's Thursday, June 6th. I'm Nora, coming to you from the beautifully late sun-setting city of Edmonton. Here are your headlines. The Ontario government has decided to end its COVID-19 wastewater surveillance program. In a statement to CBC's Mike Crawley, the Environment Minister spokesperson Gary Wheeler said that the government's reasoning is that the feds run a similar program, therefore the provincial one is redundant. The province also argued that it can analyze data that's specific to COVID-19 through a data sharing program coordinated through the Public Health Agency of Canada. But public health experts disagree, including Dr. Thomas Piggott, the medical officer of health in Peterborough, who said on Twitter that the surveillance program provided information on diseases far beyond just COVID-19. Many people expressed outrage and confusion at the Ontario government's decision to scrap the program, which really didn't cost all that much money. Now, the death rate for COVID-19 in 2023 was 1,991 people in Ontario. That was the lowest year on record since COVID-19 emerged. And so far in 2024, 450 people have died from COVID-19. Next, York University, Canada's third largest university, has joined the pro-Palestinian movement across campuses worldwide by erecting an encampment. Students from the university set up an encampment in the early hours of June 5th on the campus's green space. They're calling the encampment the People's Commons for Palestine. Students at York have a long history of standing in solidarity with the Palestinian cause. Their demands are similar to those of other encampments. The group organizing the encampment said this on Instagram, quote, "We, the students, are united in our demands to hold the administration accountable. We demand that York University disclose, divest, and boycott Israeli apartheid. We will not stop and we will not rest," unquote. Moving to what has been a whirlwind of coverage on Israeli foreign interference, starting first with a story out of Haaretz, which the New York Times also published, that outlined how the Israeli government launched a social media campaign to target Black lawmakers and young progressives in both the United States and Canada to disparage them. According to Haaretz, the campaign aimed to improve public opinion on Israel among specific demographics in these countries. Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs commissioned the report, which included creating fake social media accounts and websites using AI-generated content to spread Islamophobic and anti-Palestinian content, misinformation about the student encampments in America, and pro-Israeli content. Their content has been shared on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms since October. Stoic, a political marketing firm based in Tel Aviv, created and ran the project. The Digital Forensic Research Lab first flagged the content back in March, according to reporting from the Canadian press. In that analysis, the group stated that, quote, the network, which included at least 50 accounts on Facebook, 18 on Instagram, and more than 100 on X, boosted anti-Muslim and Islamophobic narratives directed at Canadian audiences, unquote. Then, on Wednesday, an Israeli investigative site called Fake Reporter released a report with similar findings to those of the earlier one by the Digital Forensic Research Lab. Meta and X, or as I insist on calling them Twitter, have both stated that they have removed the content related to this project, though the Canadian press story states that some of the content and links to external websites are still up on social media platforms. The various articles also state that Voices of Israel was one of the candidates for the project that Stoic carried out. Though it received funding, it was ultimately not successful. Voices of Israel is a company under Israel's Strategic Affairs Ministry and Public Diplomacy Ministry. According to Haaretz's Omer Ben-Jacob, quote, it is not subject to Israel's Freedom of Information law. It was established to shape awareness in the digital and media arenas and fight the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement and anti-Semitic anti-Semitic discourse by enlisting pro-Israel activists and organizations in Israel's public diplomacy efforts, unquote. The Canadian press contacted the Israeli Embassy for Canada for comment, but of course it denied the connections between the Israeli government and Stoic. Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East put out a statement calling on the government to investigate Israel's attempts at foreign influence in Canada, which will likely be ignored. All of this comes as the issue of foreign interference is back in the headlines in Canada. The National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians released a report on the subject earlier this week that focused primarily on China and India. And I have to say, as someone who is regularly targeted by this campaign, these bots, these people, it really leaves me anyway, a bit speechless, a bit, I don't know, like I don't know what to say because I have no faith in my government to protect my right to say very basic and obvious and objectively true things without having the full force of Israel's coordinated campaign to silence me and other people. And the way that they try to silence us isn't just to silence us online, but it's to denigrate our characters, it's to get us to lash out, and it's to convince people to never touch us professionally. I live with this every day, and I can't tell you how irritating it is. Irritating is perhaps not a strong enough word, but it is certainly the word that first comes to my mind when I think about how irritated I am by all of this. Finally, to a horrific story out of Sudan that has received little to no media coverage. The Rapid Support Forces, that paramilitary group whose predecessors were responsible for the 2003 genocide in Darfur, carried out a horrific massacre in the country's Al Jazeera state. Sudanese civil society groups are reporting that the group killed more than 100 people using heavy machinery against unarmed civilians. The videos and images circulating online show the horrifying aftermath of the massacre and what people in the targeted villages have been left to deal with. And as a reminder, this comes as similar violence is being carried out in El Fasher in Darfur, where people have been warning of a repeat of 2003. And as the UN is warning of an impending and massive famine that could impact 2.5 million people. Those are your headlines for Thursday, June 6th. I'm Nora. You are listening to this podcast at sandynora.com, on the Real News Network podcast feed, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Listen, if you get this podcast through the Real News Network, we had some technical difficulties yesterday. You may not have caught yesterday's episode. I think that's all been resolved. You're hopefully listening to today's with no problem at all. And for everybody else, well, I hope you have a wonderful Thursday. And hey, tomorrow is Friday. I'll talk to you then.